Hey everyone, Soundly here with Zynderage, I guess you would pronounce it. Is that correct, Zinder?
Yeah, just call me Cinder. It's all
Zinder.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Um, and the reason I wanted to have you on. Hold on one second. Sorry, I just did a noob thing and left my video running in the background. So the reason I wanted to have you on was me specifically. I was very interested that you had been on Nathan's panel and had become like kind of a semi-regular guest there, and you have since become, I guess, believe the Earth is a globe. And I was very curious about that and how that whole process went. Would you like to tell us about yourself?
Yeah. I'd like to start with how I even got into flat Earth at all, right? So, like 1 year ago, I started to interest myself a little bit into flat Earth. I watched some videos, primarily though from globe earthers who made a little bit of fun of flat Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So then in the last summer, half a year ago, I discovered that there is a channel called the Flat Earth Debate from Nathan Oakley, and I decided to join and trying to convince the flat earther that the Earth is a globe. Um,
Okay.
so I joined about around like once a week, and it started with like the ISS and holograms, and we shouted at each other. We debated a lot, and I came more often on the Flat Earth debate show. I joined there more often. So at some point we started to discuss the angle of view thing, which Nathan brought up during his show. Um, First, I wasn't convinced of it, and uh, then he once even kicked me because I denied it. But when around 2.5 months, went to Thailand with a friend, and when we landed and at the evening, I watched Jose's video of him in a Walmart making a light disappear by um, by filming it with, I think, his phone camera, and then he lowered it down to the ground, and the light suddenly disappeared. That that video kind of impressed me, so I started to research further into the angle of attack thing, and I've seen it as an uh, plausible explanation why ships disappear behind the horizon if the effect is visible from around 70 meters too, right? So that kind of got me into the direction of the Earth probably isn't a globe, because if ships disappear behind the horizon because of that effect, it probably isn't a curve that makes them disappear.
And so from there, what did how did you get, I guess, past that? Did you research it yourself, look into it yourself? Like, how did you overcome that idea, or do you still think that it's still plausible?
Well, the I don't think it is plausible anymore, because around a week ago I made my own observation using a laser scale. I might have it somewhere here. It's I borrowed it from my friend, so it is a scale, you see, and
Hmm, yeah.
if you take you can see like the laser
Right.
on right, and I tried to make the same observation by getting sure that the ground is indeed completely level. The reason why I even started to make the observation was because a week ago, Nick, a globe earther who joined Nathan's debate show since the beginning, talked to me on Discord and pointed out to me that Nathan is a scammer,
Mhm.
which I didn't consider before. I reached to him because I've seen him on one of the earlier flat Earth debate shows where Nathan acted completely different than today. There he was like
Right.
just a moderator.
Yeah, that's
he
how he started in the beginning, right?
Yeah, and the character shift kind of made me suspicious of him
Right.
being honest
I
regarding the
actually
flat
find
Earth.
that very interesting. Was there anything else that kind of led you to believe that Nathan was being dishonest? Like maybe him actually saying that he was intentionally tricking people, or was it just your perception as his I guess character has changed over time?
It was my perception. I haven't any proof. I
Right.
haven't gotten any proof for it. The only thing closest to the proof is the chat from him with Riley on the one video from Cat Earth, which Nick showed to me when I talked to him.
Gotcha.
It
Yeah,
could
I've
be
seen that
fake.
video as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but it isn't proof at all for him not believing the Earth is flat.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it's questionable, the way they were talking about it. Maybe it could come across as a little dishonest, but it doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't actually believe the Earth is flat. So it's interesting footage, but it's not like ironclad evidence, as I would say it.
Yeah, I
So
agree. Yeah. So
I don't mean to
sorry.
interrupt you, Zinder. Sorry.
No, I want to say I agree, but my feeling told me that he doesn't believe it when I compared those videos to the debates
Right.
nowadays. Right.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely suspect.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get too much further, and I meant to do this in the very beginning, but somebody actually asked, where is it? Are we masking the identity of a confidential informant?
So the reason why it looks so why it's so dark and it looks so pixelated is I wanted to make it the way that you can still see a little bit my facial expressions. And the other hand, that the artificial intelligence face recognition software couldn't see my face, because I think that the big companies like in Switzerland we have Nestle, who um, who have a big market in selling water and so on. I think that in around 40 to 50 years, those companies will replace the government. And on this computer with this IP, I researched it a lot, and I kind of hated a little bit against them too. And I think if they could compare my face to the face of the let's say of the official bureau, right, and can see that my official name is connected to this IP, which I never gave my official name to the internet provider or whatever, it could backfire in the future that they will they will have like a class system, right?
Right.
Where the people who were against them are going to be in the lower class.
So do you think that this also could be like a conspiracy that ultimately ends up to be less believable, like you have with flat Earth, or do you think it's more convincing to you?
I think it is more convincing, and I think it is connected to the flat Earth, because I think many of the popular figures of the flat Earth were hired by those companies to hide the real conspiracies. Like,
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I've actually discussed this with Tim Osmond before. So you think that flat Earth is like a fake conspiracy theory, which is distracting people from the real conspiracies that are actually occurring?
yes. I
And
think so.
what conspiracies do you think are actually legit, as far as, like, if you're going to take a step back from flat Earth, I'd imagine, you know, 9/11 or something like that. What conspiracy theories do you subscribe
I
to?
I don't know much about 9/11. I don't think that the official explanation is true. I think that airplanes flew into the World Trade Center, but I think that the government allowed it. Like, they didn't plan it. They had the information of Al Qaeda, that they would make this terror attack, but they would take it for their advantage to march into Iraq, and the conspiracies, I think, are connected with the big companies. However, are conspiracies that were already proven, like um, uh, GMO companies that sell gene manipulated seeds to the farmers, and they ch- um, they charge more and more for new seeds because those plants don't make their own seeds, and those are things people already know. But I think they brought in flat Earth to kind of ridiculize every conspiracy that is true, or like Nestle
Which
stealing water from the people who live there. Yeah.
So would you think, do you think that's actually a conspiracy theory though? I mean, the GMO stuff, yeah, there's a lot of farmers that are against it because it contaminates their crops, and of course they do have issues with the GMO crops being sterile and not being able to reproduce, and you having to buy more and more seeds, like you're saying. Those are real issues, I think, that they're trying to tackle. But do you think that's really a conspiracy theory? Because I mean, it's not like that's really being hidden. It's like people are actually talking about that.
Yeah, but people are talking about 9/11 too, right? And it isn't, like, I don't know, it
So
doesn't
are
seem
you?
being hidden to me. I
So
mean,
are, well, okay. Let me say this. Do you think? I mean, I would say that that's not really a conspiracy theory from my perspective. It might be like social or political problems that our society has to deal with, but not necessarily a conspiracy theory, because they're not really trying to like force every farmer to use GMO seed or something like that, for example, or they're, it seems like there would have to be more to it. Like the GMO seeds are actually altering our genetics, or something more uh, out there and less mundane than.
I I don't know enough how GMOs will affect the human body at some level, right?
Mhm.
I I I can't tell you about that because I don't have the knowledge how it will end up. But I agree with you. It doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory like 9/11, but I think that they will hide those things by pushing forward conspiracy theories, so people think that all those, like, a little bit unproven facts they uh, they have with GMOs, that they will ridiculate it, and it is only one thing, the GMO thing. Like, I think they are slowly taking over the land of the farmers, and they are doing it by giving money to the corrupt government, that at some point they will build their own little empire, and they will strengthen their position until they will be able to become the government, and it will start in the poor countries, and it will go further into the industrialized countries. So at some point, the private companies will be the government. They are doing it with lobbyism right now, and so on. But let's not get too far into it.
Yeah, yeah.
We
I guess
should.
we are speaking about flat Earth, and so I would be interested. We can talk more about it if you want to on another stream. We definitely have kind of diverged off. I was just kind of following that rabbit trail for a second, but
Yeah.
let me ask you this: what evidence, or I don't know, what conversations / evidence actually led you to believe that the Earth is a globe? And was it more related to I guess, your personal discrediting of Nathan, like you feeling like Nathan was being dishonest with you, or was it related more to evidence that you saw, which led you to believe that Nathan was being dishonest with you?
Well, the evidence I gathered for myself about the angle of view thing, which was kind of the thing that brought me into flat Earth, brought me into believing that the Earth isn't a globe.
And just to be clear, by
yeah.
angle of view, you mean angle of attack? That thing?
Yeah, angle of attack.
Okay.
But
okay.
I think he said angle of attack to upset people, but usually means angle of view, I think.
Gotcha.
So I started to make my own tests after I started to suspect Nathan as a scammer. So I made my own observation with a laser 100 meters away, and I then filmed it and compared it to Jose video that was 70 meters away, whatever, and I couldn't see any effect of angle of view. I will make more observations, and I think I will upload them too on YouTube to disprove that. But that alone was enough for me, because I was kind of surprised that I could still see the laser from so far away with my with the phone camera. This was the first observation.
Did you actually upload a video of this, or is this just something you did?
I didn't upload it yet. No.
Yeah,
it was just something I did.
Go ahead.
I can show it to you when you want by occasion.
Okay. I think there is a slight delay between us. That's why I keep kind of stepping over you. So I'm not trying to interrupt you. I just I think there's just a slight delay.
Oh, no problem. Mind. And the second thing was once I kind of put the angle of view thing out of my mind, I started to look more into perspective and the fact that when you have when you have mountains, that let's say a mountain in the distance that is 1,000 meters high, and then you have a mountain closer to you that is 500 meters high. You look at both mountains, but the mountains that is 1,000 meters high seems to be shorter than the mountain that is 500 meter high, right? This doesn't make sense on a flat Earth, I realized, because I didn't know much about perspective, and when I looked up how it really works, that if your eye level is at the highest point of the mountain, that everything behind it that has the same height will seem to have the same height too, no matter how far away it is.
Right.
Do you get what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, Conspiracy Cats and Bob the Science Guy both have pretty good videos on this, recent videos. So does Miles Davis. He has a really good video as well on it. So it would definitely be interesting to see your observation with the laser. I really want to see that. I did a video with the laser as well. And
really?
I did that in direct response to Nathan Oakley's, well, not just Nathan Oakley's. It was, I guess the first one that I saw was the Lego stacks from Dr. Zach, or that guy. And then Nathan Oakley did that video with the angle of attack where there's like a book across the room. So what is that, 20 meters away maybe? Like,
yeah.
Not very far at all. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, what we're seeing is direct evidence that the floor is not flat. Like that. And he's taken this observation and he's like backwards engineering it into some magical mechanism that makes things disappear as your camera gets low to the ground. I found that really interesting, but I also found interesting that anytime I bring up the fact that I was at 150 feet, or what is that in meters? I don't know, 90 meters, something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I
not
think
90.
like times
50
3,
meters,
like
50 meters. Yeah,
1 feet time is like
50 meters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I was at 50 meters, right, taking pictures of the causeway, and they want to ignore that because all of a sudden we're not low to the ground anymore.
Yeah.
I found it really bizarre that this angle of attack argument was even catching on, and so I find it interesting. Like, what about it made you think, hey, this is conceivably the correct answer? Like on the surface, like from the very beginning, whenever you actually thought about it.
Well, Jose's video in the Walmart made me think that.
I see.
Because every supermarket or whatever I've been to, the floor was kind of flat, right? I've
Right.
never seen a bulb
It
or
feels
whatever.
that way, right?
So,
Whenever you're not really looking close at it. Yeah.
And then after I've seen his video, I was still in Thailand, and there is a market hall, right, where there's like, I don't know, 200 meters length, and the floor also looked really, really flat there. And then I tested it for myself, not with a camera, but I tested it myself with by putting my face really close to the ground and closing one eye. So I watched a person walking away, while like many other people looked at me and thought, what does this fucking idiot do right now? Sorry. Like, I felt so silly, but I wanted to test it for myself, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen
Well, to
the
be
person.
fair, they say the same thing about me whenever I have my telescope out near the shore. So
Yeah. So I put my eye really close to the ground, and I've seen the one shoe of a person like disappearing a little bit bottom up, right?
Right.
So I thought, yeah, the angle of attack thing is real, right? Because the floor looked really, really flat, and from there I went on, like believing some other things I don't believe anymore right now because
because of your laser test.
Yeah.
So that's that I actually find this very interesting, because one of the things I've always said is you see flat earthers trying to do 40-kilometer laser tests, right, and failing to do that because the kilometer doesn't reach or it's too high or something like that. But then when it comes to like this 20 meter observation that Nathan was doing, of some lady picking up a book, he doesn't have a laser. And it's like, why wouldn't you use a laser in that situation? Because that's when it's appropriate, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually what motivated me to do my little video with Legos and lasers. Not Legos, dominoes and lasers. But in any case, yeah, the one thing that it was, I don't know, it was just sometimes these new ideas come out and it's very hard to even know what to say to them, not because they make sense in any kind of way, but because they're so absurd you don't really know how to address it. Like, how do you even, why would anybody even actually think this, comes across my mind a lot of times. So trying to get insight into how someone would believe, or what was it that convinced you. And I guess the video footage makes sense. If the video footage looks to be doing what he's claiming, then it kind of makes sense that video footage would serve to also debunk it, so to speak. So I think it would be really awesome to see your video footage up, because I think that's a very clear thing that somebody could point to. I could even link it here. I could put it right there in the video.
Yeah.
Once you have it uploaded, I can just add a little card to this video, and people can just go straight to it and see the footage for themselves.
Yeah. just to say, the thing that really convinced me wasn't Jose's video. It was just the thing that made me think it is plausible, right?
Oh,
The thing
gotcha.
that really convinced me is then in the Walmart, seeing it with my own eye,
I see.
right? And so.
And what would you say now about that? What do you think? Because the observation would still look the same to you, right? But how would you
Yeah,
perceive it differently?
well, probably the floor wasn't flat at the end, right? Probably there was a little bit of an uneven part,
Right.
and if the it is enough for a few centimeters from, let's say, about 200 meters. It is realistically that a few centimeters are uneven, even in a
Right.
building like a market, right? So that was
And
probably the case.
and if you're filming with a cell phone camera, you're talking about a centimeter, 2 centimeters, depending on where the camera's located.
Yeah.
So yeah, over the course of that distance, 200-meter distance, 1 or 2 centimeters would be completely unnoticeable to you if you were walking across it.
Hmm.
But the camera could definitely see it.
Yeah, because once you put number to things, those things start to make more sense. I had some questions about the globe model, about the heliocentric model, which kind of didn't make sense to me. But once you start to put maths in it, you can see how minuscule some changes are, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and that is interesting that you bring it up, and I'm glad you are bringing it up because sometimes it's hard to communicate with people that you know don't like maths or won't even consider it as being a valid approach for thinking about these types of problems.
Hmm.
So, how do you suggest approaching people that like literally think that maths is part of the conspiracy?
It is hard because um, I've heard the same argument over and over again. And uh, to clarify first, I didn't deny the globe because I didn't understand the how it should work. Right, a lot of concepts made sense to me. There were a few things that didn't I didn't understand, and I thought were kind of ridiculous. But I'm looking further into those. Um, to convince those people who think that math is a part of the conspiracy is really hard, and I don't think you can do it via internet. I don't think you can do it via an hangout. You have to go to them and
Yeah, I
show them.
agree with that.
Um, sorry again, didn't understand you.
I said, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. My first video was me doing maths, and I think it convinced 0 people. So,
You,
yeah.
I think you would literally have to go to those people and show them in real life uh, what it means to, let's say, for the Earth to spin every 24 hour, right? What it means in compared to the 1,000 miles per hour that are experienced at the equator. And then you have to literally you have to visualize it to them in a concept that they understand it.
Well, let me ask you this because I've often invited, and it's basically an open invite, even for these upcoming observations in January, which is, only a week from now. We've invited people, flat earthers, to come and see for themselves the causeway, the transmission lines, all these observations over Lake Pontchartrain of New Orleans. Do you think that that would actually be convincing, like for them to actually come up and look, for themselves through their P1000 or P900 or whatever they have and see the same observations? Or do you think that they would still deny it? And maybe some would and some wouldn't. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've seen your observations like 1 month ago, and I thought, unlike others that you didn't manipulate anything, I thought that it would look like this on a flat Earth. because of the angle of attack thing.
I see.
It would look like strange and distorted, and the Lake Pontchartrain power lines would look like this naturally. So first, people need to understand why it looks like that, and then they can come to you, or when they come to you, they need to understand your explanation that it can only be like this on a curved Earth, right? So I don't think it is enough.
I find that interesting. I tried to promote Walter Bislin's work as much as I possibly can. I pretty much mention it, almost with every video I do. It's definitely linked. It's like a permanent link in every one of my videos. So when you see Walter Bislin's work, have you seen that? I'm curious.
I didn't. No.
Okay, see, that's an interesting thing, that because I'm failing to communicate properly there somehow, because Walter Bislin has actually modeled all these observations in 3D on a globe.
Oh, it was him. All right, he modeled your observations.
Yeah, not just mine, but other people's as well. But yes, he's definitely modeled mine.
And then he modeled them on a flat Earth too.
Right, exactly.
Then I have seen his work. Yes.
Yeah. So my question for you would be, is that not convincing? Like you see it modeled on a 3D world, you compare it to my photograph, they look the same. Like how does that not convince someone?
Well, if a person believes that he understands perspective, right, then he sees your work and sees how it curves away a little bit, and then he says, yeah, it is because of perspective. What he shows, what the model shows on a flat Earth is false. What we see on that should supposedly be on a globe Earth, right, is what we should see on a flat Earth. And then they think, all right, on a globe Earth it should look even more curved or whatever. So no, I don't think it is enough to model it.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, but what is their basis for believing perspective would be anything different than what the geometric math shows, which is exactly what that 3D model is. It is, in fact, showing perspective. So what is the basis for believing that perspective, that word, which is being conflated by flat earthers, what's the basis for thinking that perspective somehow does explain it away? Because it doesn't, and there's been no explanation by flat earthers that make sense. So where's the disconnect? Where's the disconnect? That's what's really confusing to me, not just me, but others. Like how can you say perspective and think that somehow answers something without actually diagramming it or modeling it or showing how what you're saying, not just the word perspective, but actually showing something that you're calling perspective makes sense, like in a drawing or some type of geodesy or not geodesy, GeoGebra, like an app, a geometry app, something like that. How, where's the disconnect there?
Well, geometrically, I don't think you will ever find something that would go with, now I bring back the angle of view or angle of attack thing, because he modeled the power lines too, didn't he?
Yes.
All right. So picture it that way, that the way I understood the angle of attack thing, and I went with it, is that the light at the bottom of the power lines starts to annihilate each other when it travels over the ground. So the waves like cancel each other out at some point. It is my interpretation. I don't know how the other think of it, but the light starts to annihilate each other in waves, so that it will be cut off bottom first. But the light that is in the middle of the power grids will reach your eyes, creating the illusion that it is lower down, that it's that the power line is that the power towers are a little bit farther below.
So let's think about that. Like not the transmission lines. Let's think about that in like New Orleans, right? So the tops of the buildings are above my head, correct? So I'm actually looking up at those on a flat Earth. So the angle of attack doesn't make sense in that case. So why are the tops of the buildings where they are expected to be on a globe instead of where they're expected to be on a flat Earth? You know, if it was some, you know, mechanism where you're getting lower to the ground and that's what's causing the effect on the horizon, well, then why would the tops of the buildings be affected?
I don't know. I can't answer you that. I thought a little bit about it, but I could never come to a conclusion.
Yeah. So these are the types of things that I feel like it's just one step away from his explanation, but for some reason, on their own, most flat earthers don't take that one step. You know, they don't really think about it. Like, why are people like Nathan Oakley always trying to explain nowadays? A year ago, it was different. A year ago, it's always flat. Horizon always rises to the eye level. A year later, he's saying, yes, it looks like a globe, but this is why it looks like a globe. You know, why is that change? Apparently, his change over the last year did affect you, but why is that change not affecting more flat earthers? Why aren't they self-aware of that change happening?
I don't know. I mean, unlike other flat earthers, which I honestly never really was a flat earth. I just said, all right, it probably isn't a globe, like we were told, right?
Right.
Unlike others, I didn't invest so much into it like them, right? I went with the angle of view thing or angle of attack thing for around 2 to 2.5 months. And then I went deeper into other explanation why the Earth isn't a globe. But people who already lost their family or whatever, or lost a lot of friends, and they invested so much time and effort disproving the globe Earth,
right?
Like those things won't affect them because they have too much to lose, I think.
Yeah, that's called a sunken cost, by the way, in economics.
Oh, right. Didn't know that word.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you bring up the friends and family thing. Did you have friends and family that you came out to and said, hey, I believe the Earth is not a globe?
Yes, I told it to some of my friends, and they thought I was just trolling them. They really
it's hard
were
to
like,
tell sometimes.
Yeah, they said you have to be joking with us, but usually usually I don't try to make fun of them with certain ideas, right?
Right.
But they felt like, yeah, I just wanted to be funny or so, right? And making fun of them, and then when I realized their opinion about it, I thought like, yeah, let's just not talk about it anymore, because the way to lose friends, and I realized it by listening to flat earthers, is to trying to push the idea upon them over a lot of long time. It wouldn't be a problem for them if I would believe that we live in a simulation or whatever, or I would believe that they aren't real or so. It would only be a problem if I would try to push it upon them and talk nonstop about it.
Right. Yeah. If you were being overly aggressive about it and even judgmental, that's what I noticed. So, a lot of flat earthers kind of start off with, "Hey, look what I've learned. I want to tell you about it." And then whenever the other person doesn't accept that and believe the same thing, then they get almost personally offended by it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think they start losing their friends and family. Because I mean, there's in every family, people are going to have different beliefs about different things, whether it's 9/11 or GMO or aliens and spaceships and UFOs and stuff like that. I mean, me and my dad always have interesting conversations. I don't think either of us believe any of that stuff, but it's fun to kind of explore those ideas, just for fun whenever we're together. So I think if you can have a reasonable conversation with people, then you probably won't lose your family and friends. But if it gets to the point where you're losing your family and friends, that's the thing that kind of motivates me to do what I do, because I really don't want people doing that. I don't want people losing their family and friends. It's a sad thing.
Yeah, it is really sad, and I agree with you. If you can pull someone out of it soon enough, it won't affect their life at all. Right?
Well, speaking of that, what would you tell younger Zinder? How would you convince younger Zinder to not even get into it if you had that chance?
I would tell the same as I would tell everyone else, and don't believe what people tell you. Test it for yourself. And I think this is the key thing, because if I would have tested it for myself, properly, I wouldn't have even gotten into the angle of view thing. So everyone, like every flat earther, do your own observations and do those unbiased, please. Do those from a view of, I don't know what shape the earth is.
Well, I think that's completely reasonable. I also agree that first person experience trumps everything that's on YouTube. So go do it yourself and see the truth for yourself. I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, because once you start to follow scammers and start to blindly believe what they tell you, you aren't better than the Globers blindly believing what NASA tells you, because it is exactly the same thing at the end.
So I'm curious where you stand on that now. So obviously, whenever you started exploring flat Earth, you had to at least consider the idea that all of the footage from space, all the photographs from space, were all fake. Where do you stand on that? Have you actually pulled yourself all the way back and think maybe NASA's legit, or are you still considering that space is fake?
I don't think space is fake. I never really thought it. I never went with the no gas pressure without a container argument. But on the other hand, I never thought much about NASA. I have seen their pictures, and I could differentiate what they want to tell us is real, and when what they tell us is CGI. And often enough, they make those animation of the space probes, right, that are actually CGI, and that tell us that. So my viewpoint on NASA is I can't prove for myself that their observations are real. So I neither can disprove it, right? So
you would say you're agnostic on it?
Yeah, I don't trust them, because they made a claim, I think, like 7 years back or so. They found life on Mars. They announced it, everything, and then they, at some point, I think they retreated the claim, but I'm not sure. But I think NASA tends to over-exaggerate things. So
I would ask you to look into that a little bit more. I think what you're referring to is actually the meteorite, the Martian meteorite, where they found microtubules in it. Is that what you're referring to?
I don't remember too much about it, but
because that was definitely over sensationalized by science enthusiasts, and it wasn't a NASA claim. A lot of times that's what happens. Enthusiasts over sensationalize something so they can get clicks, essentially. and views, or somebody buy their magazine or something like that. But then at the end of the day, the actual organization didn't make the claim that they're implying they made. So
all right. So
that would be
might
something
have,
to look into.
I might have misunderstood it. Then I agree with you that often the media kinda starts with the shitstorm, right? Or
Yeah.
starts with the over exaggeration,
Right.
and then the agencies like NASA kinda don't have to say much anymore because the information is already out, right?
Exactly. It's kind of hard to rein that back in, right? Once it's out there in the wild, it's hard to stop it from spreading. Unfortunately.
Yeah, because like if like NBC and Fox News and everyone and all the news medias from Switzerland right now would go out and say, I have found the cure for cancer, right? And I never said it. And people are like, oh wow, like we finally and everything, like, and then I go out there and I say like I never claimed it.
Yeah.
And everyone says I'm a liar, right? But
Exactly.
true, right?
That's exactly what would happen, and then you would fall in the same category as NASA. Unfortunately, yeah, he's always like never a straight answer from Xander. Zinder. Okay, so I've really enjoyed our conversation, but I have totally neglected the chat. So let's go take a look at it, see if anybody's mentioned this over here.
Sure. Mind asking you some question after the questions from the chat?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right, but let's go with the chat first.
Yeah, let's do the chat just so people feel like we're looking at their stuff.
Mind if I switch off the camera so I can look at the?
No, I don't mind at all.
All right. So,
Edwin says, "Sadly, I can imagine the staff of the Marriott seeing you every now and again and going, 'Oh no, not this guy again.'" Yeah, exactly. When people see me out there doing stuff, I'm sure they're wondering what I'm doing. I actually was approached by the Causeway Police, who I must say was very polite about talking to me. Apparently, you have to actually get a pass for where I was. So we've gone about making sure that we've covered our bases there for the January observations. We will have passes.
So, sorry. Gonna stop screen share for a moment. Okay.
Flat out. Thank you for the $5, man. Appreciate that. Keep it flat, Sally. Thanks for doing what you do. Hey, I like what you do too, flat out. Keep going with it. Nathan Grant is also saying people can donate their allowance to me. Nathan, I love it. Marvel Girl says, soundly because of cognitive dissonance. Kind of have an idea probably what she's talking about. Whenever people look at Walter Bisland's models and my observations, how do they, convince themselves that it can still work on a flat Earth? Chrissy, $2. Dragons are real, globe Earth busted. I like your sarcasm, buddy. Floyd says, soundly, you mean flirspective? Yes, I do mean flirspective. Flat earthers conflate the word perspective. I call that flirspective because they have different meanings. And what else? Do you see anything that mentioning you?
No, I didn't. I'm searching for some other things right now. I'm sorry. Then looking at the live chat, I will do it later. I'm looking at the picture you uploaded once, and I got a question from a flat earther about it, which I wanted to ask to you.
Okay, yeah, hit me. What you got?
Later, but are you?
Yeah, I think I've gotten everybody's. Nobody had any really direct questions. And guys, if you're in the chat and you have a direct question, please @mention both of us. That would make it a whole lot easier because I'm only looking for @mentions to me.
Yeah.
That's all I see, like in bright orange. So if you have a specific question, guys in the chat, just or super chats work too. To help fight the good fight against the stupid. $2 from Chris Killing. Thank you, Chris.
Nice. I got one from Sen. Like he asked, "Is Cinder a flat earther?" No, I'm not a flat earther. Just to answer you the question. Otherwise, I don't have anything orange here. No. So let's see. I'm going to screen share again. So I think a person wanted to ask me about this picture, and I think at some point there are like 16 miles, aren't there? Like, do you remember?
Right where your mouse is right now, there's a fender system. The little thing, the things that stick out from the side of the bridge that have like the cross members and stuff, those are actually called fender systems. So all the way to the left of the frame, there's another fender system back there. That is 16 miles away.
All right. Because he,
so we're actually seeing like 20 miles away, basically, maybe a little bit further than 20 miles, depending on how many huts are actually behind that fender system.
Yeah. So he asked me a question like, if the Earth curve is already visible from 16 miles away, what happens with the curve that is at the horizon or so? I don't really remember. So I think what he wanted to say with it is, like, how can you see the curve so early and then still see the curve further away? Do you get what I mean?
Yes. So typically the question is, if this is the curvature of the Earth, which it clearly is, as we see the globe model on the left side actually there. So if this is the curvature of the Earth, then why isn't the horizon curving? And one thing I could say again is, well, just look at the globe model. The globe model doesn't predict the horizon to appear to curve from this height and that distance in that field of view. The short answer, though, is there are two different types of curvature that we're talking about. One is curvature on the horizon, which is what flat earthers are constantly looking for. They want to see that curvature of the horizon, and the fact that they don't see that, they use to their advantage. But in reality, that's not what we expect to see on a globe. We don't expect to see curvature of the horizon on a, this is about a 1 degree field of view. It's actually a little bit less. But let's say a 1 degree field of view, if you actually measure this and go and determine how much horizon you're actually looking at, it's only like 800 meters. So you're not going to see a drop in 800 meters.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So the only way that you can see the curvature of the horizon itself is a disk around us. And as you go higher, that disk moves further away from you. So the only way that you can see that is to get high enough to tell that you're actually looking down on a disk. And that is a different type of curvature than a great circle route. A great circle route, which is coming from the observer and is basically the straightest line between any 2 points on a sphere, from the observer going away from the observer over the horizon, that great circle route is visible from the ground. And for some reason, they like to talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson saying it's not visible until you get up to, 100,000 feet or something. I can't remember his exact quote. But if Neil deGrasse Tyson was here right now, standing by the causeway, and I let him look through my camera, he'd go, "Oh, look at that, the curvature of the Earth." I guarantee you that Neil deGrasse Tyson understands that there are two different types of curvature. Or if he doesn't, he would quickly understand within about 2 minutes of me showing it to him.
Yeah.
So they like to conflate those two different types of curvature, but they are different. They're different aspects of spherical geometry. That's what they are.
I have heard the claim that you manipulated the camera in a way, or manipulated the observation in a way that it will look curved. So I was asking myself, did anybody else make the same observation? And just to clarify, my answer to them was already clear. Everyone who wants to disprove this observation can do it for himself, right? Everyone who wants can go there and make their own observation. But what do you say to those people?
Yeah, well, you just hit the nail on the head, didn't you? You want to disprove it, go there. Take the picture. And since the very beginning, I've said that. Show up. Come take the picture. But the reason I tell people that is because I know that they will see the same thing, and that firsthand experience will convince them. When you have that firsthand experience of seeing it, it's different than just knowing it based on the geometry. So, of course, I didn't manipulate any of my footage. Zero. I've actually most of the time I've gone through long and hard efforts to put all of my genuine photography as quickly as possible out there to prove that I didn't even have time to manipulate it. And I've done live streams. I've done live streams from Little Tens's Bayou, from the Causeway, from the transmission lines. I actually did a live stream in the car where I drove to the coffee shop and filmed myself taking the SD card out of the camera, sticking it in, and uploading it directly to YouTube. And I can't do any more than that. You know, when January rolls around, I'm going to be in the hotel room. I'm going to have Wi-Fi. I'm going to set up either my P900 or my telescope, one of them, or maybe both, that will be doing a live stream while I'm taking pictures with the other one. So, you know, explain to me how you can live stream something and manipulate it, and I'll be impressed, because I don't have that skill set.
Yeah, true. One thing I want to say, still in regards to the conversations we had before, like when I thought for myself that the globe model isn't the right model, I had the impression I could discover the real world, like what stars really are, and what they like. My imagination like kind of exploded, right? And I never I never was angry at the people who would lie to us. I just was happy to know that they could, that I could rediscover the whole universe for myself, right? So once I realized that all this is kind of bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
I took more time to look into geometry and how things really work, how the solar system really works. And you could still say this is for yourself, this is a rediscovery. People already knew it, but it is really interesting to start to learn how things really work and eliminate your bias and your misconceptions, right?
Yeah.
There are still a few things I don't understand, like, but when I start to put actual numbers into them, I can see for myself why it isn't significant, why it shouldn't work. Like I thought that the upper atmosphere should move faster than the atmosphere at sea level, and I never understood how it could keep up, right? Because on a ball, things that are farther away will spin faster, right? Things that are closer to the center will spin slower. So
right.
I started to put numbers into it, and I've seen that the difference in speed per kilometer is so insignificant that doesn't matter at all, right? So go ahead and do your research, guys. Really.
Yeah, that's the thing that is a perpetual problem, is that just trying to wrap your head around scale, and we're not very good at it as humans. I mean, we really aren't. What is 1,000 years to a human? It's very hard to even wrap your head around 1,000, much less a billion. And what is millions, of light years, or what is even 4 light years? I mean, the distances that we're talking about and the scales that we're talking about are so big compared to us that it is hard to kind of wrap your head around it. And that's why I think math is invaluable, because the math can help you understand at least that it makes sense. Even if your intuition doesn't grasp it, your intuition can understand the math that goes behind it. Like you said, what's a kilometer? What's 2 kilometers when we're talking about the size of the Earth? It's not a lot, especially when you're talking about the curve of the Earth. or the acceleration due to centrifugal force.
Yeah. I agree, and many of those things I kind of understood before, but now when I look into them, I can see that my ignorance kept me away from really understanding those things. I had a lot of half knowledge, right? And I kind of would say that my I don't know if it's the ego or anything else to say I understand those things, but those don't make sense, right? So it is kind of like a good thing I went on Nathan's show and I bought his shit and that I got away from it right now because it opened a way of honesty for myself to look into things more critically and to start to interest myself um, for the actual world.
Right. I mean, that is the silver lining, I guess, when it comes to the flat Earth stuff, is that if people are honest about it and they start looking into these things, they start learning things. They start learning things that are actually kind of interesting, like the equinox. I mean, to me, the equinox is very telling. It's very interesting, and even if you track the sun on any given day, and you actually try to trace like a 3D arc where the sun is, you'll see that the sun is actually like going around us like this, and like in a circle around us, like behind us, like a three-dimensional circle, and it's only one plane that it's circling around versus the two planes of a flat Earth. And so when I think those observations, if people would just do them for themselves, they go, we don't have an explanation for that on flat Earth. And the more of those types of observations they have first-hand experiences with, the more they'll go, there aren't any explanations as far as flat Earth geometry goes. You have to always introduce some magic.
I talked to Arwin a lot about the celestial bodies, and he led me in the direction of thinking that the stars aren't material objects, that
Right.
they appear more as like holograms in a sort. They don't have to be looked at geometrically, right? But like 3 weeks ago, I don't remember, 3 or 4 weeks ago, George, a guy who went on Nathan's debate quite a lot, he started to talk to me about spectroscopy.
Right.
And it is undeniable that something that is just a hologram can't have the same elemental signatures as we know, right?
Well, it's one of those things where you're like, if it is a hologram, why does it have physical properties?
Yeah.
That's when things start becoming interesting. Those are good questions. I'm actually glad. I'm actually surprised. So he was obviously talking about the sun, right?
Yeah, the sun and the moon and the stars too, like little everything, the planets,
exactly,
and so on.
So the moon too is an interesting one because if you believe that radar works, as in like Doppler for storm clouds or radar for tracking airplanes, if you believe that works, then you have to believe also that the moon is there, because you can literally bounce radar off the moon. And also there are ham radio hobbyists that bounce signals off the moon as a competition. Like they will bounce the signal off the moon, and someone else has to, the first person basically to hear the signal wins, essentially, these contests. And they do that by bouncing a signal off the moon, and it's at the speed of light, so they can determine how far away it is. And these things are tangible things that anyone can really do if they were willing to put the effort in and take the time to do it. So I definitely wish people would do more things like that, actually get out in the real world and investigate it, because I think the more you do, the more you start drawing reasonable conclusions.
I agree. Like Edwin said that he argued spectroscopy to me and friends And I have to answer to him. I've heard it quite a lot of times, but I never looked into it after it. I've heard it mentioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, yeah, like all right, something else that like they come up with to prove that to prove the properties of the moon and the sun. So I don't know. I think George kind of had a good way to talk to me about this stuff and made me interested into it. I also started to look more into the argument that the stars prove the Earth is a sphere. I heard it so many times, but I never understood it. And then like yesterday, I looked into Polaris and I looked into the geometrical properties of it if you look at it from different places on Earth, like from the equator and North Pole, and how the angles change and how on a flat Earth this should look like, right? So
It's interesting that you bring that up because there's this guy named I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce the name, Joe's Lays. He has a YouTube channel with a bunch of people have subscribed to him. But he has this video called Funeral March for Flat Earth. And he has a bunch of videos like it. But I highly suggest you go watch that. And I'll actually share that in the oops, let me turn this volume down here. I'll actually share that in the chat here, the live chat. One
Great.
second. Because it does talk about that geometry and how it just does not make any sense on a flat Earth. This isn't specifically about Polaris. I think this is about the sun, maybe. I think it's the sun.
Oh, right.
Tracking. Yeah. Well, it's been over an hour, but before we leave, I want to make sure that you don't have any more questions for me, and then we can wrap it up.
No, I don't have any questions anymore. I think I asked you everything I wanted and everything the some flat earthers wanted you to ask. The thing with Anthony I already said to you, so I don't have to say it on live stream anymore. So yeah, I think that's it. And thank you very much for inviting me to your live stream.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you came. I definitely thought that, you being on that panel will give us some insight into, how to actually help people get out of the rabbit hole. And that's really my goal after all. So I really appreciate you coming, Zynder. And I look forward to our future conversations on Discord.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thanks, everybody.